The manual scanning feature in the ZYTO Elite software allows you to fully customize the scanning experience for each client. This gives you the flexibility to assess specific wellness challenges more directly, as well as integrate your protocols more easily. In this video, we'll dive into how to run a manual scan, along with explaining how you can customize it to fit your needs. So we'll start, as we always do, by choosing a client from the My Clients tab. And I'll select this test mail client. The next step is to then click New Session here, and under the Elite tab, we have our manual scanning screen. This has a variety of different tools and options that allow you to customize your scan. So maybe I'm working with a client that I know has digestive issues. You could scan any virtual item in the software that's related to digestion. You could do organs and glands, parasites, heavy metals, and other things like that. And then we can see how the body is responding in real time. There are thousands of virtual items in the Elite, so it's an expansive palette here that you can work with. A typical manual scan involves scanning stressor virtual items, followed by balancer virtual items, and then rescanning to find which balancers will be the best for bringing the stressors back into range. And after they're scanned, stressors will show in the stressors table, while balancers will be displayed in the balancers table. Another option here is to add stressors to this filters table at the top. This allows you to filter the responses of the items you add to the stressor table below based on whatever you add to this table. So rather than being scanned in the normal way, the stressor responses will be influenced by any items you add to this table. Typically, you'd add virtual items to the filter table first, and then scan the stressor virtual items below if you want to use this option. So you already know that your client has a stomach problem, and you want to know which foods could potentially make that problem worse. You could set the stomach as a filter, and then add food virtual items to the stressor table. You could also scan foods as balancers too, but in this case, we want to know which ones may cause stress to the stomach. Basically, we're asking, are these items in the stressor table in range or out of range in relation to what we added to the filter? For this demonstration, I won't add any items to this filters table. We'll just start with the stressors table down here. But that's an option that you can use. Now, a stressor is just what it sounds like. It's anything that can cause stress to the body. We also refer to stressors as biomarkers. So it could be internal things like organs, teeth, vertebrae, as well as environmental factors that impact the body, like chemicals and bacteria, or even foods, because they have the potential to cause stress to the body as well. We can select any stressor from the ZYTO library to add it to this table by clicking this down arrow. And say I want to add all the organs, glands, and systems to start. I can do the search here. Click into that, and then move this entire list over. And if I'm moving any items over that are gender-specific, like ovaries, it's going to ask if I really want to move that over since I'm scanning with a male client. I can just say no to all those since this is a male client, and those items won't move over. Another thing that can make this easier in the future, if I'm going to use these items all the time, is I can come up here on the right side and click this star, and it will add that category as a favorite so I can find it more easily next time. Then I would just come up here, click this star at the top, and I see everything that's been added as a favorite. Then we can also put various search filters in here. So in this case, I only want to see the stressors, so I can come in to relationships and select stressors, and now it will only show me the stressors in the selected libraries. Now I can move as many items from this library over as I want. There are thousands of options here, and the nice thing about this is I don't have to move everything over and scan it at the same time. I can scan this group, and then I can come back after and say, okay, let's scan some other things too, based on the items I'm seeing that are showing up as out of range. So if I scan all these and stomach comes up as way out of range, I can come back here and say, okay, what's related to the stomach? Parasites, maybe food additives, and so on. So let's add those. Then we could scan again and maybe parasites shows up as out of range. Now I can go back in and scan for individual parasites within the parasites category. So you can basically get a 30,000-foot view and can zoom in closer and closer based on what's standing out. Now, quick disclaimer here, just because something like parasite shows up as out of range doesn't mean that the person has parasites. ZYTO isn't a diagnostic tool. We're just looking at energetic responses here. So if we see parasites come up, it's not a diagnosis, but rather a prompt to ask the client more questions. You could ask questions to see if the client has symptoms of parasites, or maybe run additional tests to determine if parasites are really the issue. There are a variety of reasons why something could be showing up as out of range. Could be physical, could be energetic, or it could be something that's connected emotionally that's causing an item to show up as out of range. So it's important to go through all those steps rather than treating this as a diagnostic tool and making assumptions based on a single point of data. If you want more information about questions to ask for out-of-range responses, make sure to check out the article on our website that covers this, which is linked in the description of this video. Okay, back to these stressors. Once we have everything we want to scan here, we can click Next. And at this point, the client would put their hand on the hand cradle and the scan would run. And after that, we can see all the responses ranked from highest to lowest priority. Now, before we ran these stressors, we determined the person's range for the scan. And you can see that number here. Anything that's out of range or higher than the absolute value of this range number is automatically checked. So you can ignore any negatives here and just look at the numbers that are higher than the range. These are the ones you'll typically want to include in the stressor table. However, you can remove anything you don't want to have show up here, or you can add items that are in range if you want to as well. For this example, though, we'll just go in with what's pre-checked and click Next. And now you can see that the out-of-range stressors have been added to the table. And they're also shown graphically with these red dots on the right side of the screen. We see that the stomach virtual item is out of range, so maybe we want to investigate that further with some related items, as we just talked about. So let's come back here with this down arrow and select the parasites category. Then let's also select neurotransmitters. That will scan those, and then we can select which ones we want to include. Now, they're on there added to the stressor table as well. Just like with an automated ZYTO scan, your goal here is typically going to be to find balancers that bring these out-of-range stressors back into range. Sometimes you may also want to know what's out of range, but typically you'll also scan some balancers to see how you can support these areas that the body is prioritizing. So let's come down here to the balancer table and then select this down arrow. And it brings us to our library area. And this is where we get to search for product companies. We can come over here to relationships, and you can see all the product companies that we've added to the software. We have more than 250 product companies to choose from, but these are the ones we've chosen to download from that larger product company list. There are also generic balancers we can use that aren't tied to any specific product company. So that's another option to use if you're not working with a specific brand. Now, we can move as many items as we want over here to scan. But it's typically going to be easier and quicker to start with one product company. So let's choose our ABC product company. This isn't a real company, it's just a generic one we use for demonstration purposes. So we'll click into here, and then all these items are checked. We could select specific items from this list, but I'm just going to include them all and click this blue bar to move them over. And if there are any products that are for females only, it will again ask if we really want to move those over for this male client. Now, the male client puts their hand on the hand cradle again, and we click Next to run that scan. And from here, we can see the balancers that were scanned ordered from highest to lowest priority. And we can select which balancers to include on the balancer table. I'll just select the top 5. But the nice thing here is that you have the flexibility to choose which products you want to move forward with. Maybe there's something further down on the list that you think would be beneficial, and this gives you the flexibility to choose that. But for this example, we'll just go with these top 5 and click Next. Now we're back on the balancer table. The next step here is to select the product or products we want to rescan, and it will then rescan those products to bring these out-of-range stressors back into range. We can do this by selecting this column next to the item, and it will add a triangle. This means it will now be included in the circuit when we scan again. Note here that anything that's out of range in the stressors table has this triangle showing up next to it. This means that it will be in the circuit as well when we rescan the balancer. Again, another benefit of manual scanning is that we can run the balancers one at a time to see the impact that they have on the stressors, and then run it again with another balancer, and so on. This gives you a higher level of customization, and you don't have to necessarily choose all of these items to rescan. All right, so let's go ahead and select this top balancer, and we'll run the rescan here by going up above the stressor table and clicking this Rescan Out of Range Stressors icon. It's the green circle icon here. You could click the one next to it instead if you want to include the breakpoint again, where you select which stressors to include. That's this Rescan Stressors with Breakpoint icon, but we'll do it without the breakpoint. So, hand on the hand cradle now, and we'll run that. Now we can see that some items that were originally stressed have come back into range, indicated by the green dots. So that's the effect that this product had on the out-of-range stressors. You can also see on the left column here that these numbers have changed. The column on the far left shows the original scan DR values, and then this column next to it shows the DR values now with that balancer in the circuit. So the ones that came into range are smaller numbers than this range value here at the top left. Let's go ahead and select the second product, click Rescan again, and you can see that we have even more stressors in range now. Okay, say we're not thrilled with that last response that we got. Maybe it only brought a few biomarkers into range, and we want to try something else that could have a bigger impact. We can just come over here to the left side and select this back button next to where it says log, and it will undo what we just did. So you can see that it deleted that second product from our results. Again, this really allows for maximum customization to proceed in any way that you want and delete any step that you're not happy with. Another thing to remember is that you don't need to necessarily get all of the stressors you scanned back into range with this session. If, say, we got 70 or 80% of these back into range, that can be good enough to move forward with. That's enough to sort of get the body's energy moving in a balanced direction. Even 50% is still good, still positive. So don't get too caught up in trying to add a bunch of products just to try and get everything back into range. What we really want to do is find products that are going to give us the best bang for our buck, so to speak. Well, that covers the basics of running a manual scan. And you'll find that as you get more experience running this scan, you can get to a point where you actually go through a session much faster because you're pinpointing exactly what you want to go through very quickly. You can run it based on how you like to look at the body. But then it's also geared toward the client right in front of you. And you can easily make adjustments on the fly and customize it to that particular client. That's really the big advantage of the Elite over the Select and our more basic balance software. Now, there are several other features of manual scanning, which we go over in the additional manual scanning features video, so make sure to watch that video next.